Have you ever stood beside someone, touched their hand, looked into their eyes, and felt nothing? Not silence, not peace, but a hollow absence, like gazing into a mirror that reflects no light. What if that emptiness wasn't just emotional distance, but something far more ancient, far more terrifying? What if some people are born not asleep, but soulless? And what if you've invited them into your life without ever suspecting? Before you dismiss the thought, ask yourself, why do some faces haunt you while others vanish like mist? Why do certain presences nourish your spirit while others drain it like a parasite hidden beneath charm? Carl Jung warned us, but not in the way we expect. He didn't speak of devils with horns or evil etched in the flesh. No, his monsters were more elegant. They wore smiles, they paid their bills. They knew the right words, but lacked the inner voice. Jung dared to suggest that the soul is not guaranteed, that not every human is in touch with that deep, living spark. And here's the unbearable truth. Some never were, some never will be, but they will walk beside you, sit at your table, whisper into your trust, all without ever knowing what it means to be truly alive. This is not metaphor. This is not philosophy, dressed in poetry. This is a quiet scream hidden inside the human condition. Jung knew that the soul is not something given, it is something discovered, something suffered for, and those who never step into the fire of transformation never forge a soul. They become echoes, imitations, hollow archetypes. And if you've ever felt an invisible chill around someone who seemed too perfect, you may already know this. You just didn't have a name for it, until now. The question is not whether everyone has a soul. The question is, what is the cost of not having one? And worse, what happens when these soulless ones lead, seduce, or parent? What happens when they occupy roles that demand depth, but bring only mimicry? The world applauds their masks, but somewhere deep in your body something recoils. Something ancient remembers. That recoil is not rudeness, it is recognition. The psyche always knows when it's being fed shadows instead of substance. But here lies the most disturbing twist of all, and it's why you cannot afford to look away. What if the absence of soul is not a condition they carry, but a contagion? What if their emptiness is not static, but infectious? What if you, unknowingly, have already begun to dim, to dry, to hollow, just by staying close? If you think, that sounds impossible, ask yourself this. When was the last time you felt truly alive, not just functioning, but burning with purpose? The answer may terrify you, and yet, in this terror, begins the awakening. There's a silence that lives between certain people, not the silence of comfort, nor the quiet of understanding, but a hollow kind of absence that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing there's no echo, no resonance. You speak, but something in them does not respond, not truly. You laugh and their smile mimics yours like a reflection in water, never touching the depths. At first you think it's you. Maybe you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too spiritual. But then the pattern repeats, again and again, until the ache becomes familiar, not from being hurt, but from never being met. That's when the question begins to whisper in the back of your mind. What exactly is missing? Jung never whispered. He carved truths into the subconscious like runes waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to look inward. One of his most disturbing was also one of his most silent. Not every person you meet is animated by the same fire. Not everyone is called toward individuation. Not everyone is capable of soul. This isn't about morality. It isn't about kindness or cruelty. It's about something far deeper, far more haunting. Emptiness, a psychic vacancy that wears human form, a presence that mimics life so perfectly, so efficiently, that you may never realize it's not alive in the way you are. You think everyone is here to awaken, but Jung would urge caution. Many are only here to repeat, to perform, to echo, and in their eyes, no matter how beautiful, no light flickers behind the glass. Have you ever felt tired around someone who hasn't said a word? Have you ever shared joy with someone who made it feel processed, transactional, artificial? That's not just chemistry. That's resonance, or the lack of it. The soul speaks in frequency, not logic. And when there's no matching signal, Your spirit retreats like a violin string silenced by a sterile room. These people, the ones without soul, are not villains. They are not evil in the way stories warn us. They are shadows cast by life, without essence. They reflect what you expect to see, but they hold nothing behind the illusion, and in their presence, something within you begins to wither, to doubt, to diminish. Not because they attack you, but because they leave you unseen, not ignored, but unfelt. You see, the soul isn't given, it's grown. It is not a birthright. It is a wound that bleeds light, and only those who dare to bleed can bear it. Jung knew this. He saw that the soul emerges not from peace, but from rupture, from the unbearable tension between shadow and light, from the choice to confront what lives in the darkness and what hides in the mirror, from the descent into the very things the world tells you to avoid. Grief, anger, emptiness, terror. The ones without soul, might they avoid this descent. They turn from the abyss and pretend it was never there. And in doing so, they avoid becoming. They perfect the art of appearing. They master imitation. They wear archetypes like masks, but behind the mask, nothing breathes. They walk, talk, love, work, but nothing is truly born inside them. No sacred fire, no center that can suffer or transform, only surface endless and polished. And perhaps the most painful truth is this: you may love them, you may marry them, you may raise them, you may follow them, you may become them without knowing. This is the wound Jung pointed to, not a wound of pain but of absence, a missing interior, a soul deferred. It is the hollowness passed down through generations, wrapped in rituals, language, smiles, an emptiness so normalized we call it adulthood. We call it strength, we call it being realistic. But what if growing up in this world meant slowly killing the very soul you came to find? What if, through fear, shame, trauma, silence, you traded your fire for a mask? What if your aliveness, your raw, divine potential, was buried beneath layers of survival strategies that were never truly yours, and now something in you stirs, a flicker, a tremor, a distant grief you didn't have a name for, until now. That ache in your chest, that dissonance you've been carrying, it wasn't madness, it was memory. Memory of what you were before the forgetting, before the performance, before the mask. And that memory is sacred. It is not a symptom, it is a summons. The soul remembers, even if the world has forgotten. You begin to see it now, not with your eyes, but with something older. Something that's been watching from behind your ribs since before you had a name. It stirs when you're alone. It breathes in the gaps between distractions. It surfaces in those rare moments when the world goes quiet and all that remains is the hum of something ancient inside your bones. That is where the soul begins, not in what is seen but in what is felt, not in performance but in presence. And now you understand why so many feel wrong, even when they do everything right. Because they are echoes, not origins. Forms without flame. And no matter how polished their image, the soul cannot be faked. But here's the cruelty. The world rewards the echo. Society is built to praise surface, to uplift the efficient, the functional, the compliant. It doesn't care for depth. It fears it. Because depth disrupts. It questions. It breaks illusions. And so many learn to silence the voice within them just to survive. To be accepted, they must become digestible, predictable. They trade their sacred chaos for a polished mask. And over time, the mask adheres to the skin until even they forget what lives underneath. But the soul never forgets. It waits, it aches. And when ignored for too long, it turns into a haunting. That feeling of hollowness that no success can fill. That vague despair behind the smile. That dissonance that grows louder in stillness. Some people will never hear that call. Not because they're evil, but because they never stopped long enough to feel. They've built their lives like fortresses against the very wound that would open them to the divine. Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we exile in order to belong. And those who deny the shadow deny the soul, because they are twins. You cannot awaken without first descending. And those who refuse the descent remain spiritually unborn. Their bodies grow, their resumes expand, their lives become increasingly full, but they remain psychically flat. without myth, without flame, without roots in the unseen. You've felt this, haven't you? That strange alienation in crowded rooms, that quiet knowing when someone's words don't match their essence, that grief when someone mirrors affection but not energy. You begin to realize that the soul doesn't respond to language, it responds to depth. And when there's no depth, no inner fire, no silent suffering behind the eyes, your own soul retracts. It protects itself. Because what is soulless can become dangerous, not through action but through erosion. The erosion of meaning, of memory, of mystery. Being close to the soulless slowly pulls you out of yourself. It makes you doubt your instincts, your longings, your sense of wonder. And that's how the forgetting begins. Not in one great trauma, but in 1,000 tiny abandonments of your inner world. The tragedy is not just theirs. It becomes yours when you lower your flame to match their dimness. When you betray your own depth to avoid being alone. When you shrink your truth to be accepted by those who do not feel. But here is the wound's secret gift. The ache you feel is proof that your soul is still alive. The pain is the proof. If you can grieve, if you can rage, if you can long, you are not lost. You are remembering. You are awakening. You are standing at the threshold between forgetting and becoming. And this, Jung would say, is the most dangerous and sacred moment in your life. Because here, you must choose. Not between good and evil, but between illusion and truth. Between survival and transformation. And make no mistake, transformation costs everything you are not. The persona will resist. The ego will scream. The false attachments will crumble. But what is real will remain. What is real cannot be lost. The soul is not a performance, it is a fire. And all that is false must burn. You will not be able to bring everyone with you. Some will resist your becoming because it reflects their refusal. Some will call you selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. But what they mean is, you are leaving the script and I don't know how to follow. Let them go. You are not here to live someone else's sleep. You are here to remember what they forgot, to feel what they numb, to become what they avoid. And slowly you begin to feel something shift. Not outside, but within. A flicker in the dark. A warmth in the center of your chest that wasn't there before. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. But it is undeniable, like the first breath after drowning. Like sunlight through ashes, that is your soul returning. Not as an idea, but as a presence. A knowing, a stillness that cannot be faked. And from here, everything changes. Not quickly, not cleanly, but inevitably. The journey back to your soul is not a straight line. It is a spiral. It will take you down before it lifts you up. It will dismantle before it builds. But in that sacred dismantling, you will remember who you are. There comes a moment in the journey when the world no longer feels familiar. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You begin to see through things. Through people. Through systems. Through yourself. The charm of the artificial no longer intoxicates. The conversations that once felt sufficient now echo with hollowness. You begin to realize how much of your life was spent playing roles that were never truly yours. And now, like waking from a dream, you face the terrifying freedom of being unscripted. You are not who you pretended to be, but you are also not, yet who you are becoming. This is the threshold of the crucible, the psychic night Jung spoke of. And here many turn back, because nothing is more frightening than confronting the void inside and realizing you must fill it yourself. But this is where the soul begins to breathe, not in certainty, but in surrender. The old structures fall away not to punish you, but to clear the debris from your becoming. And with each collapse, something stirs in the ashes. Memory, instinct, truth. The kind of truth that has no words, only sensations. You begin to feel your own contours again. Not the person others wanted, but the being underneath. You remember what it felt like to imagine without shame, to feel without filter, to move without waiting for permission. And it hurts, not because it's wrong, but because it's been buried for so long. The pain is sacred. It means something real is waking. The child who knew, the artist who dared, the mystic who wandered, they are still inside you, waiting for your return. Yet not everyone will welcome this version of you. Some will try to pull you back into the narrative where they knew how to relate to you. You've changed, they'll say, with suspicion, with fear. And they will be right. You have, because to grow a soul is to become unrecognizable to those who only loved your mask. You will lose people, you will lose belonging, you will lose the comfort of approval, but you will gain something greater, alignment. The soul cannot coexist with the need to be liked. It seeks only truth, raw, imperfect, and alive. And if you follow that call, you will begin to attract differently. The hollow will fade, the false will fall away, and in their place others will appear, people who speak in symbols, who listen with their spirit, who burn as you do. Not many, but enough, and even as new connections form, solitude will remain your most faithful companion, not as punishment, but as space. Space for integration, space to hear the voice you once silenced. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not consistent, but whole. To hold your light without pride, your shadow without shame, to walk through the ruins of your former self without needing to rebuild exactly what fell. This is the work of the soul, to die without dying, to be reborn without needing applause. And in this sacred alchemy, time distorts. What once mattered dissolves. What once felt impossible becomes inevitable. You stop chasing life, you start embodying it, and suddenly the world speaks differently. The same streets, the same sky, the same faces, all of it looks changed because you now see with the eyes of soul. Patterns become visible, archetypes reveal themselves. You no longer ask, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask, what is this trying to awaken in me? You become a mirror, not of others' projections, but of something older, the self, the eternal blueprint beneath your personality. And with each day lived in this awareness, the soul strengthens, not with noise, but with presence, not with certainty, but with rootedness. You begin to walk as if guided by something invisible, because you are. That quiet compass inside you was never gone, only drowned out by the noise of becoming what you were not. Now that noise begins to fade, and in its place a music you recognize begins to rise, faint at first, like the memory of a dream, but growing clearer with every act of courage. Every boundary honored, every truth spoken, every silence respected. The soul is not built in moments of comfort. It is built in the forge, through grief, through solitude, through unbearable honesty. It is not convenient, it is not popular, but it is holy. And once awakened, it can never sleep again. You will never again fit where you once folded yourself. To belong, that skin has shed, that room has emptied. And thank God, because what's coming requires your full presence. You walk differently now. Not faster, not louder, but deeper. Each step carries weight, not from burden, but from meaning. You no longer move to escape yourself. You move to meet yourself, again and again, in the patterns life lays at your feet. The soul doesn't arrive with fanfare. It emerges in the quiet, in the subtle shifts, the microscopic acts of alignment, in the moment you say no when your body tightens, in the moment you stay when everything in you wants to flee, in the stillness where the old version of you would have performed but now it chooses presence. This is the quiet revolution, and it is holy. No one may see it, but you feel it in your chest, in your bones, in your dreams. The soul speaks not in noise, but in echo, and now you're listening, and yet the ghosts remain, the echoes of who you were, the relationships that once fed on your silence now knock louder, the environments that once dulled your fire now burn with discomfort, because awakening is not escape and it is confrontation. With every layer you shed, life will ask, are you sure? It will tempt you back into the numbness of familiarity, back into the performance, back into the skin you've outgrown. And here the soul demands courage, not the kind that roars, but the kind that stays. That stays soft when the world demands hardness. That stays real when the room rewards artificiality. That stays inward when the noise outside begs for your attention. This is the soul's rebellion. And it is not dramatic, it is disciplined. Jung knew this. He knew that the journey to the self was not linear, nor kind, nor logical. It was a spiral, a labyrinth, a sacred dismemberment. He knew that what you lose along the way was never truly yours. And what remains, after the fire, after the grief, after the forgetting, that is the gold. Not the gold of ego, but the gold of soul, the kind that cannot be taught or borrowed, the kind that only suffering can reveal. And so you learn to see your suffering differently, not as failure, not as punishment, but as initiation. Each heartbreak becomes a teacher, each ending, a portal, each silence, a summons. You no longer ask, "Why me?" You begin to whisper, "What is this carving in me?" And something answers, not with words, but with presence, with weight, with sacred gravity. You begin to understand now why not everyone has a soul, or rather why not everyone has claimed theirs, because to do so means walking into the fire voluntarily. It means disassembling everything the world applauded. It means saying goodbye to safety. Not because you enjoy chaos, but because the true self cannot breathe in a cage, even a beautiful one, and most will not choose this path. They will stay asleep in the comfort of imitation. They will call it wisdom. They will call it peace. But deep down you will see it, the flicker that's missing, the stillness that is hollow, not whole. And you will mourn for them, not with judgment, but with knowing. Because you were there once. You know what it costs to stay. And you know what it costs to leave. And so your presence becomes medicine. Not because you preach, not because you save, but because you embody. Because in a world addicted to the external, you carry an inner fire. And those who are ready will feel it. They won't know why, but something in them will soften, will stir, will remember. That is the quiet work of the soul, to awaken others simply by being real. No performance, no perfection. Just truth. Living truth. Embodied truth. And in that embodiment, the world begins to heal, not all at once, but in ripples, in whispers, in subtle realignments that seem invisible until one day, everything is different. And so, here you are, not enlightened, not finished, but present. Rooted, awake, you've walked through fire and silence, through forgetting and remembering, through death and rebirth, all within yourself. And what you found is not a doctrine, not a destination, but a home, a still point within you that nothing outside you can touch. That is the soul, and it is yours, not because someone gave it to you, but because you became it. And now, nothing false can stay, nothing real can be lost, and the journey continues. And now silence, but not the silence of absence, the silence that follows revelation, the kind that lingers like the scent of rain after a long drought, the kind that enters not through the ears, but through the chest. You are not the same as when this journey began. Something has shifted, though you may not yet name it. Perhaps it's subtle, a tension in the breath, a warmth behind the ribs, a stillness that wasn't there before. But it's real, and once something real has been felt, it cannot be unfelt. It cannot be buried again, not fully. It waits, it watches, it pulses. In the quiet of this final moment, everything returns. The hollow faces, the mirrored lives, the ache you thought was yours alone. And you begin to see the invisible thread that weaves it all together. The longing to be real in a world that teaches us to disappear beautifully. But now you know, the ones without soul are not the enemy. They are reminders, warnings, echoes of what happens when we abandon the fire within for the approval without. They show us what we might become if we stop listening to what stirs in. The dark Jung never offered comfort, he offered confrontation. And through that confrontation, the possibility of integration, of becoming something more than our trauma, our persona, our conditioning. The soul is not a given. It is not a label. It is not a gift from someone else. It is a forging, a remembering, through fire. And sometimes that fire looks like grief. Sometimes it looks like letting go. Sometimes it looks like standing utterly alone with nothing but your heartbeat to guide you. But within that heartbeat lies a compass that has never failed you. You just forgot how to feel it. Now you remember, not because I told you, not because of these words, but because they activated something that was already inside. Something ancestral, something holy, something dangerous. That is the soul's nature. It disrupts. It doesn't care for your plans, your timelines, your image. It only cares for truth. And truth is not always kind, but it is always freeing. You feel that, don't you? That subtle loosening of what once held you captive, that trembling under the surface, that breath you didn't realize you were holding. Now exhale. This is not a conclusion. This is a beginning, disguised as an ending. The spiral has turned once more and you are not where you were. Look around you, not with your eyes, but with that inner sense you've been taught to doubt. What do you see now that you couldn't before? What feels hollow that once felt full? What feels alive that you used to overlook? These questions are not demands, they are doors, and only you can walk through them. You do not need to rush. The soul has no urgency. It does not force, it calls. And if you've heard that call tonight, even faintly, even as a whisper in the marrow of your being, honor it. Not by changing everything at once, but by beginning to tell yourself the truth, quietly, consistently, without apology. That is where transformation begins. Not in spectacle, but in sincerity. Not in noise, but in the still, radical act of returning to yourself. There will be days when the fire dims, when you forget. When the world's noise drowns your inner voice, that is not failure, that is part of the spiral. You are not meant to ascend endlessly. You are meant to descend, to rise, to fall again, always in deeper contact with what is real. And one day you will become the presence you once searched for. You will sit in silence, and your being alone will speak to others. Not with words, but with soul. So remember this, the absence of soul in another is not a reason to despair. It is an invitation to embody yours more fully, to become the thing you long for, to be the echo that awakens echoes, to be the fire that lights another's memory. And in doing so, to become part of something vast, invisible, and true. If something in this journey reached you, even just one sentence, one image, one ache, then let that be your sign. A sign that you are not numb, that you are not empty, that you are not alone. And if your soul stirred even slightly, it is your responsibility now to keep it awake. Not everyone has a soul, but maybe you do. And if that's true, then your life is no longer yours alone. This moment is not the end. It is the return. And if you felt that truth settle inside you like a slow-burning flame, then you belong here. This space was built for you. This conversation was meant for you. Join us, not as an audience, but as a presence. Like this video if it stirred something real. Comment below. Not to be heard, but to be witnessed. Tell us what part of your soul you're reclaiming. Share this with someone whose eyes have lost their fire, but whose spirit you still believe in. And subscribe to Archimind, not as a follower, but as someone who's ready to remember. Together, we don't create content, we awaken consciousness. Let the others scroll. You are here now, and here everything begins again.